Hey guys, it's Pelican here and welcome to my magplar solo PvP build for the Scalebreaker patch. This patch has seen some significant buffs to magplar, and right now is probably the best class for PvP overall. Even though magplar by its very nature isn't good at solo PvP, it got so much buffs this patch that it's currently one of the best Magicka classes to solo PvP on. This build has a ton of healing and damage, and it also has a lot of sustain, and I think its only true downside is that it does not have a lot of resistance, but you make up for that by having a lot of healing as well as purge. So without further ado, let's get into the build. Firstly, I'll be going through what sets to run. I'm running 2-piece bloodspawn, 5-piece Bright Throat's Boast, 5-piece axiom on my front bar only, and on my back bar I'm running the maelstrom restoration. Bloodspawn is still one of the best monster sets for solo PvP. It gives you 129 stam recovery, which is always helpful, and when you are taking damage, it also gives you a lot of resistance as well as ultimate. Now because we are in light armor and we don't have any damage shields, we are really squishy, so we need some sort of defense. So bloodspawn is a really good choice for that. The ultimate recovery is also very helpful, since our main offensive ultimate only costs about 70. Having bloodspawn can greatly increase your DPS. I'm running Bright Throat's Boast. This is one of the best Magicka sets available in the game, and it's basically a Magicka version of Bone Pirate. It gives you a lot of max Magicka, which will increase your damage as well as your sustain, and it also gives you about 270 mag recovery. This is quite expensive, so you might want to substitute it if you don't have enough gold. You can always replace it with a Scalebreaker or Ember Plasm. So the next set is Axiom. Now I run this on my front bar only. This will be our main damage set. It gives you about 400 spell damage to your class abilities. Since most of our damage on magplar comes from class abilities, this is a very good set for this class. On top of that, Magicka Templar also has 30% buff to spell damage, so stacking spell damage on Magicka Templar is the way to go. And it also gives you 1 line of max stam, which will further increase your stam sustain. On my back bar, I'm running Maelstrom Restoration. This isn't too important of a set. You can always not run this and run Axiom on your back bar instead. This will basically give you a bit more sustain. For my armor, I'm running 5 light and 2 heavy. The reason I chose 2 heavy instead of 1 medium 1 heavy is because I prefer having more resistance, and I also run all impen and tri-stack glyphs. I run tri-stack glyphs to increase my max health because I don't have a lot of resistance, so having more max health is essential to avoid getting one-shotted. For my jewelry, I run a triune with stam recovery. Stam recovery isn't really necessary. You can swap this out for spell damage if you want. I just find that it really helps me survive against a lot of opponents. And as mentioned before, stacking spell damage is very effective on magplar, so I run 2 infused spell damage glyphs on the rest of my jewelry. On my front bar, I'm running an inferno staff. Now many people ask me why I chose to run inferno over lightning, and that's because inferno buffs a lot more things than lightning, as you can see here. And on top of that, because solo PvP mainly involves you taking out single targets and not AoE so if you are running in a group, you can swap this out for a lightning staff. I run sharpen. Sharpen is the best damage trait for staff in my opinion, and the reason why it's so good is because it gets more effective the more resistance your enemy has. So I won't recommend running Nunhone over sharpen. And for my enchantment, I'm running shock. Shock has a chance to apply minor vulnerability to further increase your damage. On my back bar, I'm running an infused weapon damage. This will massively increase your damage and healing done when it's up, and you should always light attack on your back bar whenever you cast a skill, so you can keep this up all the time. Next up, I'll be going through what skills to run. On my front bar, I'm running toppling charge, jabs, entropy, living dark, elemental drain, and crescent sweep. Toppling charge will be my main crowd control as well as my gap closer, and it does a fair bit amount of damage, and it can also proc the burning light passive. But the main thing about this skill is that it sets your enemy off balance, which can massively increase your damage done against them due to the exploiter CP passive. On top of that, jabs also got a duration buff this patch from 5 seconds to 7 seconds. And one thing to note is that you do not have to stun the enemy in order to set them off balance, because crowd control and off balance have separate cooldown timers. So as long as your enemy is not already off balance, you can use this skill to set them off balance even if it doesn't stun them. Furthermore, this skill can also be used to interrupt people who are trying to rest. Next up is jabs. This is your main DPS ability. By itself, it does a fair bit amount of damage, but keep in mind that it can proc the burning light passive, which depending on your luck can greatly boost your damage done. It also snares your enemy, which is helpful for preventing them from escaping, and it also heals you for some of the damage done, which can help you stay on offense for a longer time. One thing a lot of people might not know is that jabs actually got a massive damage boost this patch, because previously it was getting affected by both ironclad and thick skin passive, but they fixed that this patch, so now ironclad no longer mitigates jab damage, essentially resulting in a 20% damage increase. Next up is entropy. This is your damage over time ability. It's very useful for keeping up pressure, and it got a massive buff this patch, so it does a crazy amount of damage now. But most importantly, it gives you major sorcery, so try to keep the major sorcery up at all times. I'm using the morph that heals me. You can choose to go the other morph instead if you prefer more Magicka sustain. And having it slotted also increases your max Magicka and recovery, and when you cast it, you also get a 40% damage buff on your next light attack. Next up is Living Dark. This is probably the most broken skill that Templar has right now. It heals you for an insane amount every half second, and this will basically proc on cooldown when you're fighting a ton of enemies. It also immobilizes anyone who attacks you, so this can be really useful for kiting or when you want your target to stay in place while you're attacking them. The reason I'm running this on my front bar is because of axiom. Now you might be wondering, wouldn't this be ineffective if I just swap to my back bar since I don't have axiom on my back bar? Now the thing is, Living Dark is one of those skills where it scales off the stats you have when you cast it. So basically, if I were to cast Living Dark and then lose 1000 spell damage, the tooltip of my heal does not change. The only way you can change the healing of this skill after you cast it is by swapping to a bar with different healing done or taken passives. Next up is Elemental Drain. This debuff will greatly increase your damage done against opponents, especially if they have high resistance, and it also greatly increases your sustain when you're keeping up pressure on them. Lastly, for my ultimate, I'm running Crescent Sweep, one of the strongest burst ultimates in the game right now. Both its direct and damage over time components are extremely powerful. The burst damage can easily crit most people for over 6k, and the damage over time component can crit most people for over 3k. On top of that, it also procs the burning light passive, and it only costs 72 ultimate, meaning that you can use this very often. This skill is so strong that it can even be compared to Magicka Dawnbreaker back in the Dark Brotherhood patch, and I really think that this needs a nerf. I don't think such a powerful ultimate should cost only 72. I think it should cost more like 125 ultimate. Next up, I'll be going through my back bar. I'm running Channeled Focus, Extended Ritual, Rapid Regen, Purifying Light, Honor the Dead, and Temporal Guard. Channeled Focus will be your defensive buff. It gives you your Major, Resolve, and Ward, which is further increased if you are standing in the AoE. And since the skill is so cheap to cast, you can always recast it early in order to maintain the extra resistance. On top of that, it also returns you a lot of Magicka, so you should always keep this skill up. Next up is Extended Ritual. This skill is what defines the Templar class, and is one of the main reasons Templar is performing so well this patch. Since damage over time's abilities are so overpowered this patch and everyone is using them, having a purge will massively increase your survivability. Even though it got a cost increase this patch, the healing over time component of purge also got increased. As you can see, it has a pretty high 2-tip now, and since the area of effect is pretty large, you should try and stay in it, as not only will it give you a heal over time, it will also grant you minor mending as well as slow any enemies that enter. Another use of purge is also for kiting, because it snares your enemies and the area is very big. When you are running away from enemies, you can always cast a purge to remove snares and slow your enemies down so you can escape. So even though purge is a very powerful ability, keep in mind that it's a very expensive ability as well, and you should always time it well in order to not drain your sustain. Next up is Rapid Regen. This is basically a Magicka version of Vigor. In fact, I think it's stronger than Vigor this patch, and you should combine it with Living Dark in order to get an insane amount of healing over time. The next ability is Purifying Light. This is one of your main burst abilities, and it's usually what kills the enemy. Basically, what this ability does is that it amplifies all the damage the enemy takes and releases it as a burst once the effect ends. Both the initial and final damage are undodgeable, and you can also use the initial damage to execute an enemy who's really low on health. You can also stay near the enemy after the effect has gone off to receive even more healing. And the last non-ultimate ability is Honor the Dead. Many see it as their main heal, but I only see it as a last resort because it's very expensive, and I would prefer to heal myself using Rapid Regen and Living Dark. I think you should only cast this skill if you are low on health. The main reason I chose this over Healing Ward is because I feel that the size of the Healing Ward shield is too small, and with Onslaught and Executioner buff this patch, you often just get one-shotted through the Healing Ward, so it's much more effective to burst heal yourself out of the execute range. And lastly, for my ultimate, I'm running Temporal Guard. Now I know this probably isn't the best choice for a backbar ultimate. I think that Resto out or the Vampire Bat Swarm is better, so you can experiment with all three, but personally I like Temporal Guard because it gives me a block passive here, and it also grants me minor protection on my back bar when I haven't gone on offense for a while. And on top of that, I like using Temporal Guard to escape Zergs, because many people still fall for the trick where you jump off a tower and then you Temporal Guard back up. But one downside of this ability is that it still bugs very often, so if I'm not so lazy, I would have leveled up my Resto out and equip this instead. Other than that, for my attribute, I'm running all max Magicka, and for my Mundus, I'm running the atro. Now I think that the atro isn't really necessary, you can just go apprentice. The only reason I went the atro is just to sustain very difficult fights, and I think that for most fights you have no trouble sustaining with the apprentice. I'm also a stage 3 vampire. Now the reason I went vampire this patch is because I feel like there isn't as many mag DKs anymore, so I don't have to worry as much about taking more fire damage. And on the same note, many stam players also swapped from using Dawnbreaker to Onslaught, so I don't have to worry about taking extra damage from Dawnbreaker. Vampire gives you more Magicka and stam recovery, and it also reduces your damage taken when you're low on health, which can really save you. And lastly, for my food, I'm running the tri-stat drink. Make sure you run a drink in order to proc your Bright Throat's boast. And if you feel like you don't need that much stamina, you can choose to run double bloody Mara instead. If you are not using Bright Throat boast and you're using Amber Plasm or Scalebreaker instead, you can choose to run your standard tri-stat food or the upcoming gold tri-stat food, or you can also run the Artaeum Pickled Fish Bowl. For my race, I'm a Breton. Now Breton is definitely the best race for Magicka Templar because of this passive. It reduces the cost of your mag abilities, which is very useful because, as you can see, all your Templar abilities, especially your Purge and your Honor the Dead, are really expensive to cast. So this will greatly boost your sustain. You also get additional spell resistance and some mag recovery, as well as some max magicka. So other than that, for my potion, I'm running the Essence of Immovability. I'm running the one that gives me magicka, spell crit, as well as immovability. Since I'm not running Vampire Bane, I still need a source of spell crit, so I get it for my potion. Lastly, I'll be going through my champion point setup. For my blue CP3, I'm running 49 Elemental Expert, 72 Elfborn, 32 Spell Erosion, and 11 Blessed. I'm running 28 Master at Arms and 3 Staff Expert, as well as 75 Thaumaturge. Make sure to have 75 points in Thaumaturge in order to get your Exploiter passive for your off balance. For my raid 3, I'm running 66 Ironclad, 54 Resistant, 37 Hardy and Ellie, and 56 Thick Skin. Thick Skin is more important than ever this patch due to all the damage over time buffs, so you can always choose to run more on this. And I'm also running 9 Expert Defender and 11 Quick Recovery. The green tree is entirely up to your playstyle, but for me, I run 56 in the Warlord, 27 Sprinter. I run 1 Siphoner to give Templars an additional thing to purge, 37 Arcanist and 27 Mooncalf, and 61 Tumbling and 61 Shadow Ward. So that's all for the build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know many of you are returning to magplar this patch, and I hope that this video has helped you in doing so. A huge thanks to my friend Lyser for helping me out with this build. I put his channel link in the description. Do check him out for some Magicka Warden or Magicka Necro gameplay, and I'll see you guys in the next video.